Right now.
All right, and I see Andy join us. Okay, good. All right. Good evening, everybody. We'll call our Town Council April 27, 2021 workshop to order. The time is 6:01 p.m. We do have a quorum here. Councilperson Mandy David is absent, but we have all other council persons in attendance. We will go ahead and stand for the pledge, which is always fun virtually, but we'll do our best. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God.
All right, thank you all. Tonight we are discussing our, well, first of all, just let me say something briefly, because I believe that for Councilperson Davitt, this is his first workshop. I know that you had visited several workshops prior to election, but at our workshops, usually they're for information and or when we want to have a lot of sharing among council members. Of course, we have to do that in the sunshine, so we use the town workshop format. It works pretty good. We will not ask anyone to vote on anything at a workshop. They're usually just, like I said, for information, discussing projects, getting a lot of back and forth feedback. And then sometimes at the end, if we're looking for direction on how we're going to proceed at our next council meeting, or direction on a project or task for staff to move forward, then we'll just kind of take a reading of how everybody feels about it. So not an official vote, but you can kind of say like, I'm good with what we're talking about. I think we should move forward. So we may do that at the very end. For something like tonight, this is more information analysis and how we look forward to seeing where we're at and where we're going to move forward. So with our budget and projects. So without further ado, do we have any open forum or public comment?
Nobody submitted anything prior to the meeting, and I'm not seeing anybody on the chat.
Okay. All right. If by chance we do at some point, we will pause and go ahead and allow those individuals to have their 3 minutes. But seeing none at this point, we'll go ahead, Robert, and I'll flip to you for our FY 2021 midterm report.
Yeah, and also for Councilmember David's education is that every April, May, I typically do this so we know where we're at with the budget since it's mid-year of the fiscal year. Sometimes I give projections of what we're looking at for next fiscal year, but based on the pandemic, it's really hard to tell. I do believe that we're turning the corner as it relates to half-cent sales tax, state revenue sharing, so on and so forth. So it's going to be easier to tell probably in June when we start doing June or July when we start actually doing the workshops. And also I can tell when the new legislation that was just passed as far as the online sales tax gets passed, on what type of revenue windfall we will see from that. But typically, and it's sad to say, is we don't get the Department of Revenue estimates until after all the budgets are actually approved. That's something that we keep hammering the Department of Revenue about, is like, okay, well, you're supposed to be a basis for us to use in order for us to create budgets, but you don't give us the information until after the budgets are already passed. So sometimes we're having to make some slight adjustments prior to October 1st when the fiscal year starts. Before we get started, always, we want to make sure that residents, council members know is that we are always budget conscious. We make sure that we are conservative with our estimates. We want to make sure that whenever we're in a mid-year posture, we're not into where we're going to be in the negative at the end of the fiscal year. So we want to make sure if we need to make cuts, we need to make cuts. If we need to go ahead and move forward some projects, we'll be able to do so depending upon the revenue sources that are coming in. And also we can see where our reserves are and if we want to tap into some reserves to get some of these projects done. One example is, and you'll see in one of the final slides, is where our reserves are right now. And you can see how we've dipped into them for several projects like Park Avenue and the stacking lane over at Windermere Elementary School. So we put a lot of money away just for us to go ahead and fund these projects, self-fund these projects, because if you're not aware of the charter, we have a 12.5% pretty much breaking point to where we can't take out a loan for anything over 12.5% over overall general budget. If so, we would have to go ahead and do a referendum. And that pretty much lowers the bar to about $600,000. There's not many projects I can do that are less than $600,000. So if I were to do West 2nd Avenue, any other roadway, I would need a referendum. And you know that would create issues because people that don't live on the roadway would probably not vote for the improvements on that roadway. So it's kind of the back and forth that we have to do. So we mostly just stash money away through our CIP or through our budgets to make sure that we build up our reserves so we can self-fund those and avoid having a referendum. So with that said, again, it's the April 27th, 2021 mid-year report. And I will buy somebody a free beer if you can tell when my kids got sick during this presentation, because you'll see a lot of elaborate, nice looking slides, and then you'll see very basic slides. So Friday at 2 o'clock over at Windermere Brewing, I'll get you a free beer if you can tell me which one, when that breaking point was. And all this will be made available online. Also, we'll make sure that you guys get the data that we have, which is all the revenue reports and the expenditure reports, which has every single detail. And then the way that we do this is, you know, not only from the revenue standpoint, but from the expenditure standpoint. From the revenue standpoint, when I first arrived in 2010, I wanted to make sure that we were basing it on past data. You know, a lot of times you see town managers and city managers, they just add a 5% escalator or a 3% escalator. That's not the way to do it, because again, certain taxes go up and down. Communication service taxes have gone up and down over the past couple of years. Utility taxes, fuel taxes, again, because of the fuel economy of cars, it's gone down. So you don't want to get into that type of method. So the past is the best predictor of the future. So that's what we do, is we look at about 10 years of past revenues in order for us to project what's going to be coming for the next fiscal year or for the next actual month. And for the expenditures, you know, sometimes people look at it and be like, okay, well, you spent $2,000 this first 6 months, so it's got to be $4,000 for the rest of the fiscal year. That's not necessarily the case, because that $2,000 might be a one-time charge. That's not going to be a continuing charge. Or there's some sort of anomaly that occurred during the first 6 months that won't occur over the next 6 months, and you've just blown your budget because you just went ahead and got lazy and just doubled the cost. But typically with salaries, FICA, Medicare, and retirement, that's pretty stagnant, and you're not really looking at tens of thousands of dollars. So that's typically evened out. But when it gets to repairs, legal fees, so on and so forth, that's really looking at what we spent over the last 6 months and then what we're anticipating for anything over the next 6 months. So getting to the revenue. So here's the breakdown of the revenue. Again, this will be provided to you. I'll email you the PowerPoint or PDF, and then we'll also post it. And also the YouTube video is going to be posted as well. But you can see that most of the revenue that we receive is from ad valorem taxes, over 53%, which is in our case, it's very good because, you know, a lot of other municipalities, you know, they have enterprise funds, general funds, so on and so forth. We're not really diversified. And I think that's what's killing a lot of other municipalities, because they do count on some of that commercial tax base. And with the pandemic, it really took a big blow on them. But by ours being mostly a residential tax base, it really didn't have that huge of an impact on us. So for the estimated revenues, and what I have in red is the items that are in the negative, and then what's going to be in black is stuff that we're seeing mostly in the positive or neutral out. So as you see, ad valorem is always going to come in either through tax certificates or the assessments. And again, with the local option gas tax, the pandemic had an impact on that. So we're seeing less revenues coming in for the first 6 months. I do think that's going to pick up after the next 6 months, because again, gas prices are going up and people are actually getting out and about now, especially with the governor relaxing the restrictions today. and pretty much letting us know after the fact, which is always fun. Councilman or Mayor O'Brien shaking his head because this has been status quo for the last year and a half that we're the last ones to know. Good news is that with utility taxes, based on the new agreements that we have with Duke, we are seeing additional revenues coming in from them. Water is just off minimally. Communication service tax, that's going up as well. What communication service tax is your Spectrum, CenturyLink, broadband, also cell phones, stuff like that. So, again, during the pandemic, everybody's home. So people are trying to get better services, higher services, quality services, and that has actually increased. We did see a decrease in that probably about 4 years ago, and that's because of the competition between all the communications companies to where they were offering better package deals, home bundles, stuff like that. But now with everybody streaming all their shows and working from home, we are seeing an increase in the communication service tax. That is a tax that the state legislation continues to threaten, for lack of a better term, and it's because of the heavy lobby of those communication services. Local business tax always stays the same. Building permits, we are anticipating about $300,000 in revenue from that, but just to put that in perspective, we only receive 20% of that revenue. The other additional 80% goes to the building inspectors to cover their costs. And the good thing about that is that we don't have to continuously adjust our rates. Some will increase their rates and lower their rates, and that's just a headache because then it's confusing for some people. Because by Florida statute, you can't have a real reserve when it comes to building permits because you need to go ahead and lower that. A lot of people in 2004, 2005 had that issue to where they had to start giving money back to developers because they weren't adjusting their building permit fees. Zoning plan review is showing a $15,000 loss, but we always reconcile that at the very end of the year because projects take a long time. Sometimes they overlap, 2 fiscal years. So what people do is they put in a deposit and then we draw from that deposit. And if they owe us additional money over that deposit, then we hold their building permits until they pay for the balance of that. So until a project's actually completed, we actually will get that money. But based on just the projections, I'm just estimating about $10,000. But with some of the big projects that we have coming in, we should see more money coming in as well through the zoning and plans review. And you'll see that too as far as the Wade trim bill. I think we're looking at about $90,000 with the car project, with another project that's coming through, and with several homes being under zoning and building permitting right now. We are going to see that hopefully not offset because we do want development to pay for itself, but it'll hopefully bridge that gap between the 10,000 and 90,000. But again, it's hard to predict because we don't know when that project's going to be done, so we can go ahead and recoup those funds. Franchise fee for Duke, again, based on the increase, we're able to realize the Till 287, and that was something that we did prior to the last fiscal year. Franchise fee, or like a Popka again. Oops, sorry, I'm having to do admin and PowerPoint at the same time. But as you can see, we have some smaller, revenue sources. They're really not a huge impact. They're really de minimis when it comes to the grand scheme of things. For code enforcement actions, again, you budget what you anticipate, but then, you'll only recoup what you spend on those actions because they are liens on the property or assessments on the property. So if somebody were to have a yard that needs to be cleaned up, we would go ahead, pay a lawn company to clean it up, and then we would assess them as a tax assessment for that cleanup for the next tax cycle. So, what we spend, we get back in the long run. As far as the Sunset Bay repaving and the Willows MSTU, again, those are things that our assessments, park tennis pass. We finally received the closeout for the FERDAP grant for Central Park. That was something that we were working on for about, I would say, 7 months. I'm just trying to get the money back. We're finally able to realize that. With the state JAG grants, that is judicial assistance grants. And those are something that are for law enforcement. What the condition is that you cannot budget for the items that those JAG grants pay for. So I think we were able to buy and purchase AR-15s as well as ammunition. And we were able to purchase additional equipment for the law enforcement or for the Windermere PD. But again, that's going to offset the cost where you see they're overrun in ammunition and guns, as well as some other things in their budget, but it's offset by that revenue source. Half-cent sales tax and revenue sharing. These are the two big streams that we saw a huge hit in. And again, that's directly related to the pandemic. But based on the other incomes that we receive, they're going to be completely offset. And you'll see that we're going to be in the positive at the very end, especially with the $750 that we're getting from the Department of Treasury, hopefully soon. But regardless of that, based on our expenditures, we're still going to be in the positive by about $260,000 or $240,000. And again, that's a testament to staff to making sure that they're only spending what they're authorized to spend, or they speak to me or Nora or Debbie to make sure that if they need to make adjustments, we make adjustments for them, but only within their budget, because you guys are the only ones that have the authority to make an adjustment between two budgets, meaning that I can't take money from police department and take it to admin. Only you guys can do that, and that's through what's called a budget reconciliation process. Instead of me doing that every single month for you guys, we do that at the end of the year after the audit, so we know exactly what we need to reconcile, and we are required by law to do that 90 days after the end of the fiscal year. So that's typically done in, I believe, November. So police services, again, that's going to be a little bit lower. Magic program, that's actually the SRO program. I don't know why we keep calling it Magic program, but we'll have to reclassify that and recode that. Again, any code changes that we make, we have to go through AccuFund. Every time we go through AccuFund, it costs us additional money. So as long as we know what it is and we can explain to you what it is, it's a lot easier than spending money for them to create new codes and go through that whole arduous process. But again, the Magic program is the SRO. Again, police service, police off duty impacted by the pandemic. Solid waste is going to come in. Rent, we're seeing a decrease in rent, but I do believe that in the next 6 months, we're going to be able to see an increase in the rental of town hall. We are seeing an increase in the rental of pavilions as well. People are looking at outdoor facilities for their graduation ceremonies, for birthday parties, so on and so forth, because of the pandemic. So I do believe that even though we're only seeing about 4,200 right now, we're loosening the regulations on town hall rentals, and with weddings, celebrations, we will see an increase in that. And I do believe that we're going to realize at least $18,000 this fiscal year.
We also lost rent when the old facilities were torn down as well,
Yes.
correct?
Yeah, but we factored that into this because in previous years, it'd be about $66,000.
Right.
And that's why we had it down to about $30,000, because that typically was what we realized from town hall rentals and, even the community room. But, I typically don't charge anybody use of the community room when it was able to be used, because I just felt bad for people that had actually.
They should pay you.
Exactly. The Windermere Wine and Dine, again, this is a cost that's a wash, because again, any revenue that they received, and expenditures that they spend is going to be coming from their reserves if they don't have an event. Now, they had an event planned in March, but it was March, right, Bill?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was canceled because of Orange County Utility, or OCU, which owns the Pines, would not allow them to have their event. So now they're just holding off until next January, when hopefully they can have their event again. So you see a huge loss there, but understand that, again, with a loss there, you're not going to see a huge expenditure loss either as well, because again, they pay for themselves. Sponsorships, again, because nobody's having lunches, police mileage, and then admin off duty. Since there's not a lot of off duty, we typically charge about a 10% cut if somebody is trying to use our officers if they want to be at the Citrus Bowl, if they need to be at UCF, so on and so forth. So we typically charge, an admin fee for us to do all the payroll processing, for us to get the contract signed. And we're seeing a dip in that because, again, there's not really that many off-duty abilities right now with the pandemic, but hopefully that will loosen up. Pancake breakfast, that is something that we may need to talk about when we get to the very end of it. It's in July. I just need to get a comfort level from the council of whether or not we need to proceed with that, or should we just wait until next fiscal year? Again, we're in that. Do we want to do something? Do we not want to do something? Do we want to be the first, or do we want to wait and see what happens with other municipalities and how they're handling it? Whether they just do strictly fireworks with social distancing, or because, again, we're the pancake breakfast where it's pretty tight knit. So, and we're serving food. So that's a whole different animal that we need to talk about. It can be talked about either tonight, or we can hold off till May, because the only issue that we typically have is getting volunteers. But as far as getting the food and whatnot, that's really easy to get. So if you want to hold off on that conversation until the May Town Council meeting, which is not really agenda heavy, we can do so, but just think about what you want to do with that. With the Downtown Business Committee, again, now that it is in hiatus, they're not going to be receiving the funds that they believe that they were going to receive. Same thing with Parks and Recreation, because they, cannot hold their events, and the same thing that goes with HPB and other committees. The only committee that's really realizing some revenue right now is the tree board, and that is because we still have the farmers market operating right now. Hopefully we get food trucks back in August. Again, we don't want to be the first ones, but I believe in August, September, maybe we'll be able to go ahead and start doing that and doing it safely. And that is usually when our biggest months begin. August, September, October, November, December are our biggest months when it comes to the food truck event. But once they do start up, then HPB will have a continuous flow of money coming into their organization. And again, you can see the breakdown as far as the revenues, what we budgeted and what they're probably going to be realizing. I did include here the American Recovery Act, which is $750,000. You might say, oh, great, now that's just going to boost all of the numbers to where, you're going to look like you're golden in the very end of all of this. But I made sure to subtract that out at the very end, because we still need to figure out what the Department of Revenue is going to allow us to use that money for when it comes to infrastructure projects, and if we can backdate it, or if it's everything that's going to move forward on how do we try to get some of these projects done utilizing those funds. State appropriations, I have that read it out too, because I didn't want to include the $300,000 from the state because I want to make sure that it gets finalized prior to us putting that in the budget. And I do have that itemized at the very end as well. We have worked, again, we were approving the House bill. They had committee, I believe, on April 16th. And I'm still trying to figure out what exactly is in the consolidated bill, and whether or not Governor DeSantis is going to sign off on everything. I know that they just passed a huge bill, or just a huge budget for the school voucher program. So I'm not sure where they're going to do the shell game on moving that money around, because they have to find it somewhere. And again, we have federal appropriations that we requested $12 million from. Haven't heard from that yet. Right-of-way use agreements and the contributions. So all in all, we are looking at a windfall of about $534,000 over what we anticipated for revenue sources. And again, you might say, well, you budgeted $750,000 in that for the American Recovery Act. We're going to back that out at the very end, but you'll see, so you get an accurate number of what we're actually going to see as far as an impact to the town budget. But again, revenues are based on conservative estimates. We use the 10 years of data to project. Where there's some revenue shortfalls where they occur, the expenditures wash the loss, like Windermere Wine and Dine, Parks and Recreation, DBC, HPB. They don't spend what they have unless they use their reserves. Gas tax and half-cent sales tax, and then the revenue sharing we already went over as far as why they've seen a dip. But hopefully we'll see a comeback in the half-cent sales tax. Revenue sharing, again, we'll see that increase as well. Building is split 80-20, American Relief Fund, and then we're still waiting to see on the $300,000 from the state appropriation. So any questions as to the revenues?
Yes. Maybe it's I guess it balances out later on in your presentation, but the Orange County Utilities payback for the Park Avenue project is it's not a revenue or?
That's stormwater.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, typically, I mean, with the general budget, I'll do a mid-year report, and what I'll do is for the so I'll do a supplemental report for the stormwater. And since we just received that check, I think last week, I'm going to be able to go ahead and reconcile that and be able to provide you with that data on what we're doing in stormwater.
No, that makes sense that it's on the stormwater portion.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, with all the projects that we have with stormwater too, it's going to show probably negatives until we start hitting those deliverables to where we get that revenue in for the FEMA grants that we were awarded.
Yeah, and then speaking of FEMA, maybe this is a question as we get to the reserves. Where are we at? Are we just kind of letting it go, the FEMA reimbursements that we didn't get back because of discrepancies?
Yeah, it's either you sue the state and the federal government, which I know some parties are, but we've consulted with our attorneys who they do represent some of the municipalities that are in litigation. And it's just pretty much the attorneys are going to be making money out of this. And I don't think the municipalities will.
I think, Chris, and I think the only opportunity for that is if you have a couple big municipalities decide to sue the state. There was some talk about that, Lake Worth, West Palm, maybe some others. If there were some that maybe went together, you might have a shot. We could piggyback. But I think that all kind of became quiet when COVID happened.
Yeah, that's the direction I thought we were going to maybe piggyback off some other municipalities, and then it just kind of died. Never heard anything more. So
yeah,
I mean, we could pay attention and then make that decision when we get there. But Robert's, City Hall fighting City Hall. Yeah, it's going to be tough.
Yeah,
what was the value of that?
It was $421,000.
But didn't we get part of that? Didn't we get part of that back?
We did get part of it back, but through the IRMA, when we had IRMA, they deducted the $400,000 out of that. And just so you know, Councilmember Davitt, in 2004, again, we had all of those hurricanes. We had 4 hurricanes that came through town. So, FEMA has a certain amount of time to do, number one, a closeout, and then number 2, they have a certain amount of time to do an audit and actually appeal whatever the money that was given to you. They can try to take it back or hold it from you in case there's another future emergency or something like that. So we had all the documentation, and when FEMA said, hey, state, we paid you too much for the town of Windermere and all these other municipalities, the state went ahead and repaid FEMA. And then what the state didn't do is they said, okay, well, municipalities, if there's another future issue or emergency, we're going to withhold those funds, or you can go ahead and pay those funds back to us to make you whole. But what they didn't do is when we had an appeal period, we were able to prove that we didn't overbill, we didn't double dip, and that amount was significantly under scrutiny. So we submitted our appeal to the state. The state held on to that appeal until the appeal period for FEMA lapsed. So the people that were going to receive the money, pretty much the gatekeepers held on to it. And by doing that, we lost all ability to appeal FEMA's decision on recouping those funds. Even though FEMA stated to us that they agreed with our assessment, but it was too late.
It doesn't, and I don't know, Tony, you may or may not be aware of this, but so for all the disasters, the state is the applicant, we're the drop down. So basically we lost our ability to appeal based upon Department of Emergency Management, Division of Emergency Management failure. So and along with us and probably 36 other municipalities. So it's super frustrating, but the bar is also incredibly high for litigation. So we're going to have to kind of see who wants to dip a toe in that water. There were a few big municipalities that lost millions. So I'm thinking that they'll be the ones to lead on that. We'll have to see.
Yeah, I think Port Charlotte lost 4 million on that deal or something like that.
I have the list if anybody's interested in it.
Yeah, I think I shared the list, and we also made contact with those that were on the list to the county managers and the city managers as well to see what their posture was. Some were saying that they were considering litigation. The other ones were saying we're just going to consider it a wash. Because again, as the mayor said, City Hall fighting City Hall, typically you're just going to, pay the lawyers' kids' tuitions because it's just an ongoing process. Now, Representative Thompson, when we brought that up when she did come to the town council, she did say, okay, well, maybe we can get it through appropriations. That was something that was never going to fly. Because then I think the state would have to admit that they made a mistake, and I don't think anybody was going to support that. So
that is correct. That part won't happen. The only way you could do it is legislatively versus a straight appropriation process. And just basically say you can't hold someone accountable for something they didn't have the opportunity to appeal. But this is why now the state holds your money until there's 100% audit by KPMG. And so when we get our reimbursements in a disaster, even when FEMA obligates the projects and sends the money to the state for Windermere, it has to stay in Tallahassee until it's 100% audited.
And we were audited 4 times for the 04 hurricane events.
Right. But at that time, Robert, they only audited, and the way you got the way Windermere was able to have that money in their hands was they were auditing like 30 or 40%. So to make sure they never have this happen again, now they audit 100%.
Yeah. So either way, we're whole with the department now. So if there's a future event, we would be reimbursed whatever percentage per whatever the directive is. But again, I think that legislatively is the only way to do it. Number one, to close that gap as far as auditing, because it was 14 years after the event when we finally found out that we were in arrears, which was unacceptable. And then the fact that we were not afforded our due process in order to recoup those funds. So that's the backstory of us and DEM and FEMA.
Yep. Just for reference, Katrina is still not closed.
Yeah, I know there's still money for Matthew as well that we're trying to get our hands on. Oh, and Katrina too. Sorry to keep this going, but so I think they have 10 years after the closeout to audit you. Is that correct, Jim?
I believe so.
Yeah, so they can come back 10 years later after the closeout, which again, Katrina was in 08? 05. So something that happened 16 years ago, they can still have another 10 years after they close that out to come back and get you for arrears if they find out you spent more than or spent less than you requested.
So I think that, and this is important for everybody to understand too, especially since we have new council people, these monies were from the 04 storm. When you look at our track record on reimbursement since that point, it's extremely high. And that's because we've trained staff to understand project worksheets. We have, monitors and, folks who make sure that we dot the I's, cross the T's. It's not easy, but definitely, our track record on reimbursement is much improved since then. And we also make sure that we have all of our processes in place, all of our bids in place, our debris management plan and all of that. So, and, we know a few people in the disaster business too, so we'll be okay.
Yeah, that always helps. And we were actually, I think, one of the first to submit for ARMA reimbursement. So we're the guinea pigs in their new portal, which was always fun. but we did receive 100% of the funds back or less than what we owed for the '04 hurricane. So again, it's, we have a lot of experience in this, and, especially Nora, Debbie, Tanya, Travis, and PD, we know how to document everything and make sure that we have everything logged in. And then we have FEMA counters as far as at the debris sites, as well as Rain or Shine, who has FEMA approved sites for dumping, so they can weigh it too. In '04, we didn't have that.
Exactly. So,
And
I think we've remedied it. Go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
I was just gonna say that's the frustrating part about the situation, because I know how hard you, Robert, and admin work for these grants, and to have equivalent to 6 or 7% of our budget worth yanked out from under us. It's it's still hanging in the back of my mind. So that's why I want to kind of see where where we're at. If it'd be nice maybe if we can just touch base at some point. I know COVID's probably nobody has their eye on it, but maybe touch some of those municipalities and see if it's still on the radar. If it's not, I mean, we're not going to be able to fight Goliath, I know, with the town of Windermere, but if there's a group of them still thinking about it.
Yeah, I did reach out to Florida League of Cities. They're one of the entities I did contact, and I think they were taking a neutral stance on that.
Yeah, and that's the challenge, because unfortunately, you're dependent on the same folks that you're about to go to war with, and it becomes you have to just balance that out and decide whether that ROI is worth it to you.
Right.
But again, if you've got 5 or 6 counties going for it and you can piggyback, absolutely. The person that was in charge of this and made these mistakes, she's no longer with the state. So, I mean, it did have an impact. Also, I do get to see Kevin Guthrie. He's the FTEM director now. So I'll ask him, because he's a county guy originally, so he understands the impact that these type of mistakes make on smaller communities. I mean, to Chris's point, if you've got $100 million budget and you lose $500,000, that's one thing. But if you have a $6 million budget and you lose $400,000, that hurts a lot more. Point well taken, Chris. We'll keep, we will keep it at forefront, and if there's the opportunity for council to approve something to make it happen, we will do it.
Yeah, just an inquiry, and I'm just wondering if the Florida League of Cities has some sort of pulse on it, if they've, if it's come up on the agenda or anything like that.
No, yeah. Again, when I reached out to them, it was just mostly just a neutral. Hey, you might want to just contact those other municipalities, see what they're doing.
Right. Because what's happened here is, with COVID, all this money's been being pumped into city budgets and town budgets, and especially county budgets, and the state as well. I mean, the federal funding saved the state budget this year, and it's going to save a lot of county budgets as well. So, that's what happens. When you're able to plug the holes, people aren't looking at those dollars as hard. So that's probably taken some of the steam out, but it could come back as everybody reviews their budgets for the next year.
And as you see from this snapshot, again, this is how our expenditures are allocated. Again, the majority of it is going to Public Works as well as the police department. Police department does include fire department. With Public Works, that does include debt service, not only for the Main Street debt service that will expire in 2024, but also for the new facilities debt service. But again, you can see how it's split up. So again, in the red, I always indicate where we went over budget, and then you can see where we're pretty much on point with some of the other budgets. One of the issues that we had with coding this year was that we made some adjustments to the AccuFund system. Not only did we make adjustments because of, just trying to get the coding right and try to move stuff around to where it matched the actual budget that we approved in October, actually September. But also we had some issues when we incorporated it with our new ADP payroll program. So there's some coding issues that'll have to be reconciled at the end of this to match what was budgeted. And one of those things is the email and software programs that we did budget for, but they weren't coded correctly, not only legislative, but you'll see it throughout the board. My intent was to have, instead of it broken out to an email for each individual department, I was doing it, okay, well, just have admin have all the emails as far as the expenditure, so it's not spread out across the board. Same thing with website hosting, computer maintenance. We do want to make sure that that's split out so I can see who may need training and how to operate computers and fix computers. But server hosting, stuff like that, it's not necessarily needs to be broken out per each individual department. But again, that's the way we had it last year, but it wasn't transferred over into this fiscal year. So we're gonna have to amend the coding for next fiscal year to make sure it matches what we budgeted for. So when you do see the deficiencies in those departments, that's exactly why it happened.
There are offsets, Robert?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. In my budget, you'll see that I'm under. And for the police department and communications, you'll see with the not encryption, you'll see the list out, but that was supposed to be budgeted into the police department, and I don't know why it wasn't. But as you'll see, it's gonna be covered through non-expenditures. But again, through the coding, I'm gonna have to figure out, okay, where did the coding go wrong? Is it, was it supposed to be paid out of mine, or was it just completely left out of the budget? And why was it left out of the budget when it came to the line items that we put into AccuFund system? Because, and real quick, I'll show you what I base this on. Can you guys see this?
Not yet.
Okay, sorry. You see it now?
Yes.
Okay. This is the coding. And this is what I look at to make sure that, if there's an anomaly here, there's something there. So you can see it is a lot of information. And each one is identified by a certain code in the side. So this is what the AccuFund system pushes out. So if we don't give AccuFund the correct information as far as the coding, then it gets thrown into, I guess, our old coding system, which split it up between each department, but we changed that last fiscal year. And I'll provide this to you as well, in case you need some sleep reading.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. And let me go ahead and share get back to share screen. Okay, can you guys see this?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Good.
Legislative.
All right. And again, you can see, Florida League of City dues, that was $20 over. Wine and dine event, that's what I was talking about, that money in, money out. So when you see that huge loss, it was money that was not spent. And the money that is over the 25,000 that they realized this fiscal year is coming from their reserves. And we'll do that through a budget reconciliation process, which is going to be after the fact in November, depending upon what they spend or what they earn prior to the end of the fiscal year. And I'm trying to see if there's any other anomalies that we saw in here. But basically, again, for the legislative budget, you guys are going to be under by about $123,000. Again, with Windermere Wine and Dine, that was money in, money out, and then any money that they have came from their reserves, which we'll reconcile. The miscellaneous to be adjusted, and there was again coding errors in that. Luncheons, plaques that actually should have been coded to either my department or another department. And I'm not anticipating a chamber event this year, but if we do, again, it's $1,500. And as you'll see at the very end, it's a drop in the bucket. It's not going to be a huge impact to the town if we were to participate in any of those chamber events. And for all the council members, if there's a chamber event, we always will pay for a ticket for you and your spouse in order to attend any of the events, because it's a great way not only to network and support the local chamber, but it's also a great way to get in touch with a lot of the local municipalities to talk about what's going on in their areas, and maybe we can figure out how to help each other. A great example is I saw Steve Kuntz of the town manager for Oakland on the West Orange Trail yesterday when I was hiking. He bikes every time he does every lunch break, and we started talking about the Healthy West Orange task force, and when we're doing our presentations in May and so forth. So again, it's just funny where you meet people and see people, but those events are a great way to actually interconnect with county commissioners, city officials, and so forth. And then again, town council to discuss the July pancake breakfast. And we can again do that tonight, depending upon how long we go, or we can discuss that at the May town council meeting. If you want to put out some feelers to some of the residents in town, if, you know, what way they feel if we were to go ahead and cancel it just for this fiscal year, because again, we're going to be in close proximity with each other. All right, so administration, you can see a lot of red here, and I apologize for that, but it's not because I blew the budget just to blow the budget. It's because we are looking at some changes, and I'll explain those changes. Salaries, again, you know, thank you again for the pay increase. That was something that wasn't budgeted for, but that's something that was approved. So that's why the salaries are going to be over. And the same thing with cell phone allowance, car allowance. That is something that typically is just rolled into salaries, but it was broken out this time. And that's something, again, it's such a minimal impact, and we all know exactly the amount that it is. It's $6,000 a year. It should just be rolled into salaries and shouldn't be broken out. But unfortunately, Lillian will be moving to Brazil in September. So we're going to be losing a part-time administrative assistant. Speaking with the staff, once we move into the new facilities, it's probably going to be best if we hire a full-time administrative assistant, and then we'll have a full-time executive administrative assistant. So Diane would move into the executive assistant role, and then the administrative assistant would be the person that you see in the lobby when you first approach. Those of you aware, is Diane, she is the jack of all trades, one of the best hires that we've had. She is busy with, you know, the website, the app, agendas, meetings, so on and so forth. And when she is being interrupted on an hourly basis, if not multi-hourly basis, it's just she's not able to get the work done in the amount of time that you would want it to get done. So we believe that in the next fiscal year, we're going to budget for a full-time administrative assistant to be in the lobby, and then Diane would work in a cubicle in the back and work on all the other stuff. In addition to that, she's going to be helping out Dorothy with a lot of the clerk stuff, to learn that position, to help out Dorothy with, again, records management, record scanning, and then incorporating that into the Granicus and the Red Square software program. So that searchable records that a lot of the council members want and a lot of the residents want, we're going to be able to do that. But again, it takes a lot of sweat equity to do that. And we're not able to do that with the current staffing levels that we have. But by just making it a person from part-time to full-time, the budget impact, again, is probably about, I would say about $27,000 for next fiscal year, which again is a drop in the bucket when we can, when the work productivity that we're going to get out of that new person is just going to be worth it. Now, there will be some overlap, and I did include that in the salaries and the fringe for this fiscal year for the next 6 months, because we do want to get somebody. It's going to take about a month and a half to get advertising done, and then probably hire somebody within 2 months, and then start training for the final 4 months of the fiscal year. Actually, 3 months of the fiscal year. Unemployment, that is something that with ADP, the new software, the new time clock software. So we were pretty much like in the Flintstones age, to where you had a clock in and clock out in this antique looking time clock. We no longer do that. We make sure that we clock in, clock out using our cell phones. The officers use their tablets and their laptops to do the clocking in and clocking out. It makes it a lot easier for payroll periods. So Debbie's not having to go through all the time cards, adding up the time cards, the differentials in the time cards. And also they can go ahead and submit everything as they do right now for vacation and sick time. So the ADP program that we implemented is something that we've been working on for the last 3 years. and we're able to finally implement. And that's something that, again, Public Works really appreciates, the PD appreciates. I can tell you right now, Finance really appreciates this as well, because that reduces their amount of time on having to do payroll. Again, everything that's fringe is related to that additional person being hired. Email service, website hosting, computer maintenance. Under computer maintenance, that delta of $11,000 is, again, where some of those software programs and some of the other stuff was supposed to be included in that and was not. As you know, we switched over to Chatterbuzz. There were some pros and cons on that. We're still working through some of the cons, trying to get our website searchable and trying to see if they're still the right company to go with, but we still are hosted through CMS, and we have to pay them $250 a month in order for us to maintain our windermere.town.fl.us site. So at some time in the future, we may have to go back to CMS, which is, again, maybe a better product than we currently have with Chatterbuzz. And you can see with the legal fees, we're keeping those down. And again, for you, Councilmember Davitt, that used to be a $200,000 expenditure per year when I started in 2010. And over the last 10 years, we're able to dwindle that down to $80,000. And that's from, making sure that we work with staff to make sure that we're reducing our liability exposure and not creating liabilities, and we're doing things right, and we're not starting fights that we can't stop. There's history behind that, and we'll be more than happy to sit you down and talk to you about some of those histories, but that's a huge win for the town. We're able to reduce it by $120,000 over the last 10 years. So for my expenditures, I'm going to be over budget by $23,411. And again, as I said before, that is pretty much spot on with hiring of the additional person while keeping Lillian on board for training the new person until September, and then we do the switch over. And again, to reiterate myself, or repeat myself, again, the salaries, I added 20,000 employment. That was with the ADT or ADP recoding. It's minor dollars, but we need to make sure that everything is coded correctly. So when we do the audit, and then also when we do future presentations, you can see through the expenditure reports, each line item is correct. For miscellaneous, it's over because we did the Power DMS, which is for the public records. You can do searchable public records. Or now, actually, no, that DMS is actually the policies and procedures. And the reason that we implemented that, it falls underneath the 10,000 that allocated by the town council. But with everything that's going on, and with the police departments, with municipalities, what we wanted to do is make sure that we had a software program to where, typically when you get first hired on by somebody, they would hand you a, personal rules and regulations. Some people would read it. They usually just skip the part until they can read about vacation, sick time, so on and so forth. But with this program, whenever we do an update, we send it to everybody. And if they don't read it, they have to read it through their email system, and we get notified if they actually read it. And if they don't read it, then we can actually implement some disciplinary action until they actually read that amendment, because we want everybody updated on all policies and procedures. Again, if we make a change to use of force, if we make a change to car chases, a lot of the stuff that we make changes to are related to PD, because it always changes with the statutes. We want to make sure that the officers are aware of it and that the officers actually read it. And that municipal, or the Power DMS, has given us that ability to do that. And again, we included the app this year, which was not budgeted, and that cost about $3,500, and that is actually up and running again. We had a little issue with the app, but now, again, people are going to be able to get text alerts on when we're having meetings and what those meetings are about. So again, we're over budget by about $23,000, and that's because of the new hire. And if anybody is chatting right now, again, I can't see it because because I'm trying to do admin and everything else. So if you have a question, please feel free to put it into the chat box and I'll get it into when we get to the questions portion.
There's nothing in the chat at the moment, Robert.
Good. All right, clerk. Again, this is Dorothy. This is a one-person show. So again, everything's usually consistent. And this is usually something that we're under budget on. With the committee board agenda software, that was something that we had to amend a couple of times. And then every time you make one amendment, one change, then that creates, added costs. So we do believe we're gonna be over budget in that. Postage and transport fees. What that is even though it is through the development services, not development, well, through Wade Trim, Dorothy still sends out the notices, whether it's going to be for a variance, if it's going to be for a home business tax license, that's money that we get recouped. So even if it's over budget, we're still it's being washed out by the revenue source. And again, when you have the miscoding of the email services. But all in all, she's gonna be under by about $13,337. I think Dorothy is online. So Dorothy, I hope your son is doing well. Elections were again less than expected. And then a committee board agenda software, want to make it searchable, so that went up a little bit. And then the advertising for the postage, again, with ordinances, variances, all that stuff, it costs more money. Finance, again, with the AccuFund system, with the amendments that we made with the ADP, it did cost a little bit more than we anticipated for the budget, but again, it's $611 out of a $6 million budget. That's really a drop in the bucket. Retirement admin fees, this was something we actually budgeted for, but again, it was something that was not coded. That is just the money that we give to our Raymond James and Nationwide associates in order to maintain and run our retirement accounts. I'm trying to see. Spectrum Bright House, we had additional costs, not only for the transfer of moving to new facilities, but also, or temporary facilities, but also we had a lot of lag time in our bandwidth. So we want to make sure that we increase that as well, not only for the town, but also not only for the staff, I'm sorry, but also for the town. So when we're inside town hall, we're able to hopefully get a faster, more reliable service if you're going to be on the tablet, if you're going to be on the computer, laptop, whatever, especially when we're live streaming. So we had to increase that.
Robert, I think that there's a few things in this in these line items that we'll be able to get through American Rescue Act as well.
Good.
That will definitely be one of them.
Yeah. Credit card and bank fees, again, this is a wash. Well, not, that's because we stopped taking paper money and we strictly went through credit cards. So that's why that is off by about $1,250 because we went to credit card only because of the pandemic. Everybody's worried about handling cash, so on and so forth. So once we get back to cash, I think that's going to be reduced a little bit. Postage lease, again, it's over by $50. Server maintenance, that is supposed to be something that is included in my budget because again, server maintenance is a set cost each and every month, and it shouldn't have to be broken out into individual departments. So all in all, the finance department will come under budget by about $13,500. The AccuFund system, again, was overdue to edits and coding. Retirement admin will include that $1,500 in the budget for next fiscal year, and the Bright House was overdue to increase in internet service. Nobody's getting a free beer yet. You didn't tell the difference between the revenues and the expenditures? You had nice designs for the expenditures, and now revenues, it's like,
but Robert, you didn't make it very attractive. You're giving away free beer from a free beer event where there's free beer.
That's because I'm budget conscious, Mayor.
I understand, sir.
Or everybody's glazed over anyways at this point and don't make a difference.
That free beer is just a drop in the bucket.
Because budget is, The budget is very sexy, exciting discussions. So yes, I'm sure that you are on, very intrigued and on bated breath of exactly what I'm presenting to you tonight. Debt service for the Main Street project. Again, that expires in October 1st of 2024, and that's actually going to be only $111,000. So we'll be able to recoup that money back into our general fund, which will help offset the loan, the 20-year loan for the new facilities. So that's going to hopefully wash that one out.
Can we pay that off with the American Recovery Funds if it's retroactive? Is that
Debt
one of the ones?
service,
Is that what I think you're thinking of?
I'm
I
not
don't
sure you
think
can
so.
with debt service.
Okay,
But we'll find out.
be nice to get rid of that.
Treasury guidance should be out fairly shortly. First checks are due fairly shortly here in the next week or two. So with that, I expect to come the guidance from Treasury.
Yeah.
All right, good.
And the interest for the Newtown facilities, there was a miscommunication between Nora and I on somehow it got missed in the budget. That is a $54,000 hit, but we own that mistake, and that's something that will not be not corrected in the future. So we'll make sure that we include that interest in the Newtown facilities for next fiscal year. Unemployment, again, that's something through ADP. The general engineering services, now you see it's 40,100, but you'll see the breakdown. That includes John Fitzgibbon when he was working in the interim for Scott being out. In addition to that, there's for Newtown facilities, we hired John as a project manager, and some of those funds should be coming out of that loan that we took out. So we'll be backing some of that money out as well to get that overage of $40,000 down. And that does include like $10,000 for miscellaneous for Kimley Horn Associates to do their designs for certain areas, and also for us utilizing them for advice or expertise in some of the things that we're working on, and also their inclusion in the monthly projects meetings.
I think that was partially offset too, Robert, because we weren't paying Scott's salary during that same time frame. Correct?
Yes, correct. Miscellaneous facility repair, as you'll see, 30,000 of that is the money that we got through the COVID relief fund, was for the new HVAC system in Town Hall. But they're still going to be over by a little bit, or I'm anticipating them to be over by a little bit. Again, you can't really predict or project when things will break down. But when things happen, you can try to recover by, either holding on a line item or adjusting a line item within your own budget. Same thing with miscellaneous repairs, sprinkler repairs, $35. Tree mitigation expenses, this comes out of the tree mitigation fund. I know Parks and Recreation or Tree Board is looking to do, correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, about the invoice I just signed for the Central Park.
Yep.
So is that around 5,000?
I think it's 2,000 for the
2,000.
trees themselves, but the next closest bid was 8,000. So they're saving a ton of money, and Public Works is going to help with the planting. And then they've got a bunch of volunteers lined up for this week and next to plant the smaller plants as well.
Yeah. And this is one of those areas where I think with the 4,850, that is the number that is supposed to be in the Arbor Day tree. I think this is what they spent for the Arbor Day trees. And that should actually come out of the Arbor Day where we give them 5,000. So they're actually under budget on that. So actually the 2,000, it should just show as tree mitigation expenses as 2,000, not 10,000. So I'll make that correction when I finalize or send the report out to you guys. Shell sand rock. I know that Tanya is looking at different composite material to put on the roadways, and that's gonna be part of her dirt road maintenance plan, which I do have a draft of. I just haven't had the opportunity to review. But I don't wanna handcuff her and not giving her all the ability to purchase the shell sand rock or whatever composite she comes up with in the future. Again, vehicle batteries, it's always hit or miss. Vehicle tires, it depends. You know, those tractor tires are very expensive. If one blows out, then we need to buy a new one. Tree removal, that's an act of God. We're always at, depending upon which storm event. So right now we're at 21,000 that we've spent this fiscal year. We're only budgeted for 25,000. We're just entering now hurricane season, not this upcoming month, but next month. And, you know, we just want to make sure that we have some leeway there. And also we're going to be spending $20,000 on the tree canopy pruning as well. Water cooler, that was additional expense on switching out from one company to another and then getting a better system in place for Public Works. Capital equipment, that is Tanya's laptop and getting Tanya set up with her new office. And you can see the other ones are just at services as it relates to our fleet. The one thing that we didn't budget for, and I'm very hopeful for, is the right-of-way land acquisition, which was approved by Town Council last meeting. The total budget impact of that, if I am successful, would be $107,363. Again, that's not budgeted for, and that's something that we just threw in there so we can acquire those remaining 4 or 5 properties so we can connect Windermere Elementary School all the way down to Town Square. So that's something that wasn't budgeted for. Pavement management plan, we're not going to be doing that this fiscal year. Again, that's something that we have so few paved roads, and our PCI, or whatever you call it, the index to where you identify what your pavement grade is. I think we're in the upper 80s, 90s, which is crazy. But that's because we have so few paved roadways, and the ones that we have paved have been paved within the last 10 years. The only ones that we're still working on would be West 2nd Avenue, which is under design right now, almost final design. And then Lake Willow Boulevard, I'm sure when we do the new pavement management plan next year, that'll be bumped up on the list. But that PCI index is going to increase, especially with the willows that we just had done last fiscal year. So all in all, they're over budget by about $141,000 or $142,000 if you want to round up. But again, realize that $107,000 of that is because of the right-of-way acquisition, and $30,000 or $33,000 of that is for the COVID-covered HVAC system in Town Hall. So they would pretty much wash out and be on budget for this fiscal year. Which again, I'm going to repeat myself. We adjusted the salaries based on new hire. The general engineering services over budget because of John Fitzgibbon stepping in for absence and miscellaneous projects, which is some of the coding issues with Newtown facilities that should be reconciled with when we do the budget reconciliation in November. The new HVAC system, about $31,000. Repairs, we had a lot of repairs that had to be done to the skid steer, so that threw that off budget. Again, as you'll see with PD, you can never anticipate when something's going to break down. We did have tractor repairs of $2,000. Tree mitigation expenses, they're always covered by the mitigation reserves. And hopefully we get some more of those reserves put into place because of some of the acts of some of the residents over the last 3 to 4 months. We have one that's under mitigation for, I think, about $7,000 for them cutting down trees without the proper landscape architect plan or arborist plan. Even though the state statute preempts a lot of things, we still have code enforcement actions that can hopefully get us some more money into that bucket. And what you'll see too is what I didn't include in this previous email was the $587,000 for the expenditures. And the reason for that is covered through the loan. So we draw that from the loan. So that's money in, money out. If I were to include that in the estimates for the final, which I can't really estimate how much we're going to be by September 30th, that's all covered by the loan amount, which we pay $300,000 a year for. So that's just again, drawing down from that loan itself. It's not having a direct impact from us financially.
Is that the same with Public Works, new facilities? Also on that page?
That one was not budgeted for. That's one where we
Okay.
split between 2 fiscal years. That was missed by ADG.
Yeah.
When they looked at the new facilities, they just looked at, the brick and mortar for new offices, and what they didn't look at was the shed. So we're able to split that between 2 fiscal years, this year and next year, and be able to absorb that full cost. So that's not part of the loan drawdown. And as you can see here, again, as I said before, miscellaneous for services, the skid steer, right-of-way acquisition, tree removal, streets and roads, the 330 that we have in there, we're probably gonna use every bit of that for the paving of Old Dirt Main. New admin and PD facilities, the expenses are covered by the loan withdrawals, and the debt service for the 6th Avenue roundabout, that'll be paid for by 10-1, or the Main Street improvements, 10-1-24. Police, we're under budget for salaries. That's due to, with Sergeant DeStefano retiring, and then we had some staffing changes. We have some new members in. We have some people that transitioned over to Orange County. That's always to be expected, but we are able to realize some savings in that. For reserve salaries, we do anticipate spending the entire amount on that. Crossing guards, for some reason, again, we wrapped everything into salaries and we didn't break it out for crossing guard salaries. And somehow, again, with the coding issues to the general ledger, it broke it out to showing crossing guards. My viewpoint on that is salary is salary, so it should be included within the salaries. Off duty, again, we're not going to realize the entire amount of off duty because of the pandemic. Unemployment, that's an ADG or ADP issue when we switched over to the new payroll program. Tires, again, PD beats their cars up pretty good. Vehicle repairs. I always give Jason Bonk a hard time because he's the one that selects the cars, and it's always through a state contract, and it's always via Sun State Ford, I believe it is. But again, with the dirt roads, the amount of, or the fact that we didn't have really pool cars, we run those cars pretty hard and pretty long. So, we're looking at a few cars, we had to do a lot of repairs. So we're looking at being about $12,000 over budget on that. And then with the email archive, evidence.com, CTS America, and the server maintenance, again, that was stuff that was budgeted. For some reason, it was not coded in the general ledger. So that's showing that we're over budget each one of those, but it was a part of the original budget. And for the miscellaneous, I believe that broken down in the notes. In the Magic program, that's no longer, we no longer do that. That was something to where you had Officer Friendly would come in and do some classes, or usually Lori. But again, per COVID, that is something that we don't do anymore. And by having an SRO station there throughout the school year and throughout the school day, they're able to do just impromptu classes, impromptu trainings, stuff like that. Emergency equipment, bulletproof vests, ammunition, and the Verizon Air Cards. Verizon Air Cards, we're gonna have to look at the vendor and look at how much we're paying for that. Again, with a lot of the computers, we went from, laptops for a lot of the officers, not only the laptops for them to do reports, but also the laptops that stay in the car. They need those Air Cards in order to work. So that's something that we have to reconcile through the next budget. And also talk to our vendor to see if we can save some money, or maybe switch to another vendor.
Aren't those state DMS as well?
Yes. So it's an interstate contract, but again, there's way to, like with the MiFis, we're able to get those for a great deal.
Right.
So we're hoping that we're able to negotiate something either collectively with the other municipalities or individually. For somehow, I think Sergeant Bonk is always great at negotiating some of these prices down for us.
Okay,
and getting us some stuff for free.
so the MiFis are different than these
Yes.
because they slide into the computer or something, or?
Yeah, the Sprint Air cards go directly into the computer. The MiFis are different. I think those MiFis are Verizon.
Yeah, they are. Well, because Verizon's the state DMS provider. That's why I was wondering. I was thinking that maybe it's because we have more, Robert. I don't know. And I don't want to get in the weeds here tonight, but I mean, it's definitely, those should be available, I believe, through the state DMS contract. So,
Yeah,
and they would be $60 a month, which is a really good deal. So, but maybe there's something I'm missing. So,
yeah, and we'll take a look at that. Again,
Yep.
when we do these breakdowns, it's good for us to figure out, okay, why is this over budget, or why is this significantly under budget? You know, did you ask for too much? Did you put in a want and not a need, or is there something that we need to negotiate down in order to make sure that the costs are comparable to what we're getting as far as service?
right. Did you mention the ammunition and guns too? That seems like it's.
Yeah, that's the JAG grant. That is the money for the AR-15s and the ammunition.
And we got the JAG grant. Okay.
Yeah, we received about $17,000 in JAG grants
Yep.
this fiscal year, and we actually just applied for another one. And I do believe that we're going to be able to get some new vests for some of our new officers, because again, every time that we get a reserve officer, we have to, fully equip them. And also the Kevlar has a lifespan. I forget what the lifespan is, but then you have to change them out every so often.
Right.
But with the JAG grants, we're able to cover those costs.
Sounds
Okay,
good.
so the JAG covers the vests, the emergency equipment, and the firearms.
Yes. Nothing really of importance here. I don't see. It's on the bottom. The capital equipment for our computers was over. Car mounted radar, I think that was something that wasn't budgeted for, but was requested by chief. And again, from a cost benefit analysis, it just made more sense to actually have those car mounted radars installed as opposed to the hand radars. And Axum body cameras, again, whenever we hire a new hire, we need to make sure that we have body cameras for each, and we want to make sure that each one has their own body camera. So it's not running out of power, or if somebody forgets to upload it, we know who is the one that forgot to upload the system. But all in all, you're looking at about a $67,000 savings in the police department. One of the good exciting news, with the SRO card that we were able to fund last town council meeting, a great idea that Sergeant Bonk, and if he sees this video, he's going to get a big head, and Chief did, was that they recommend that we get the Mustang wrap on the car. So I think it's a good idea to do that, so it ties in the police department with the school itself. So, like we did with the Officer German memorial car, this one will have a Windermere Elementary School Mustang wrap on the car, of course, with the Windermere PD logo and identification as an SRO vehicle. And that'll be covered either through the foundation or the town, and I'll bring that back to you probably in May. Dispatch fee will increase in 21-22. As you know, Winter Garden does our dispatch. We did approve the active threat alarm. That was something that was recommended by Chief. It's a Wi-Fi based system. And the reason that he wanted to include that is, again, in today's age, you never know what's going to happen. And it's completely different than a fire alarm. An active threat alarm will send off a different signal. So if you hit it, then the officers know that there is an active threat. So they'll probably come out with guns drawn, as opposed to a fire alarm where they'll come out and say, okay, what's going on? We've actually had, I would say, 3 occasions over the last 4 weeks. One where we needed to trespass somebody, and one where actually needed to escort a gentleman outside of the office because of their behavior or because of the manner in which they were talking to the employees. So this is really something that I think is a safety issue. And when it comes to 5,000 versus the safety of your employees, again, that's something that, I didn't even think twice about going ahead and authorizing that. And when you go into the temporary facilities, it's something that we can move from the temporary facilities to the new facilities because it is Wi-Fi based and it is just screwed into the wall. So when you go into the building and you see these blue boxes, that's exactly what they are. A lot of vehicle repairs, so that will deflate Sergeant Bunk's head a little bit. The software programs, again, that wasn't coded. That was an error by myself for finance of not making sure that that was coded correctly or budgeted correctly. I put in here 10,000 drag grants, but it's actually 17,000. That will cover everything that we talked about, including some of the tasers. And then we're checking out the vendor specs with the air cards. All right, development services. These are some scary numbers, but I'll elaborate. Building inspection fees, again, we're over by 60,000, but remember, every dollar that comes in is covered by the permit fees. So we're anticipating $300,000 in building permit fees. So they receive 80% of that, which is $240,000. Building zoning admin fees, again, whenever we asked Wade Trim to do something, if we were to hire an individual, it would probably cost us between $60,000 and $70,000 in order to have a person in-house. By having Wade Trim, again, we have all the disciplines in one house. So when we just do regular day-to-day operations, that's something that they would take care of. In addition to that, we will get recouped through some of the zoning fees to hopefully offset that $20,000 loss that we're anticipating for this fiscal year. But we won't know that until September, once we know which projects are closed out and which ones are still ongoing. GIS contract, we'll make sure that we budget for that next year. That's something we pay for each and every year. I think it usually comes out of admin, but we allocated it to development services. So when you see the overage of $81,000, don't worry, 60 of that's already covered through the revenues. And then the 2160 is something that hopefully we'll be able to recoup from the 20,000 is something that we'll hopefully recoup from the zoning deposits. Boards and committees, everybody's gonna be under because they haven't had events. They weren't able to spend the money that we allocated for them. So you're seeing expenditure savings about $148,000. So here's the good slide. So your revenues you bring in is about $6.8 million. You spent or going to spend, I anticipate $5.8 million. So what you have for contingency is $682,000. $750,000 of that is again what we projected in the revenues for being from the American Recovery Act. We don't know how that's going to be able to be spent yet, so I deduct that out so we don't see the 982 and go, well, we can go ahead and do all these various projects and we can self-fund these projects because I need to know what guidelines are going to be set forth by the Department of Treasury before we actually start spending that money. In addition to that, I didn't include the $300,000 from the state appropriations in case we don't get that money through the consolidation or budget consolidation, and if Governor DeSantis actually signs in it to a bill to where we get that money. And then we are still waiting on federal appropriations later on. This doesn't include any appropriations that may be available to us if there is a infrastructure stimulus package that is going to be passed by the feds. And then once that is passed, maybe we can tap into that resource as well to offset some of the costs from some of these projects that we're doing right now. So the balance of that is about $232,000. When we did the 2018 tax increases, again, we put money away into reserves and it's put into the restricted reserves. So we put it in for when we need to self-fund a project, kind of like the multimodal path, the bridge, the water lines, stuff like that. So the only one that I didn't include in the expenditure report was the $25,000 that we put away for Parks and Recreation. So I backed that one out too. So what we're looking at saving or our contingency is about $207,000. From staff standpoint, since we are moving into hurricane season, that is typically at or around what our contingency always is around, between $150,000 and $200,000, for that rainy day fund, no pun intended, for the hurricane season. But that is something that, I feel comfortable with just holding on to and not adding more expenditures. Again, especially with the pandemic, the unknown of hurricane season, I would just, not approve any additional projects until we're comfortable on what we're doing with our money right now. But $207,000 is a nice healthy contingency. So basically, the summary is the town worked within the constraints of the approved budget, but we'll need to make some adjustments or amendments in November. That's something that happens every fiscal year. As in the report, we work diligently to stay within the budget. With recovery, hopefully around the corner, we'll hopefully regain the lost revenues. Again, the new online purchase tax, that legislation just passed, and hopefully we can tap into some of that American Recovery Act money to reimburse for some of those lost revenues. And then currently we're at 24% reserves, and that is industry standard. It's a little over industry standard, but again, we use our reserves not only just for reserves, but to pay for those projects that we wouldn't have to go to a referendum on. So, but based on the reserve amounts, the town may be able to self-fund various projects that we have in the works, the water mains, the bridge, the multimodal path. And that still doesn't account for the other resources that we're still working on, which is again, Healthy West Orange, safe routes to schools, and also other grants that we're trying to get. So here's your reserve balance as it stands right now. I put the highlight in. That's where I started. So we started with $341,000 in reserves when I first came here in 2010. The only dip that we saw was when we had the Hurricane Irma, which was in 2018?
18, yep.
2018. So we saw a dip in that. And we also saw a dip in 2017 because that's when we did the Park Avenue project where we self-funded that. But then we were able to continuously add to our reserves over the last couple of fiscal years to, again, we're at that 24%. And then if we're able to add another $200,000 to that for this fiscal year, then we're going to be very comfortable with our reserves and be able to go ahead and self-fund a lot of those projects. And with that said, I'm open for any questions.
Council, any questions for Robert on the budget?
Yeah, Robert, you said you're going to share that with us?
Yeah, I'm going to show you not only I'll make the PowerPoint presentation available to you, but also the financials and the general ledger inputs.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I do not have a question, but congratulations. I appreciate you. It's $1.7 million in the middle of COVID and being in the black. That's quite amazing. So bravo.
Good job.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a team. It's not me. Everybody understands. I think we have done well in hiring, and they understand that, the first thing when we ever get down into the budget is, let's talk about needs first and wants second. And that's why we have the wants on hold right now, is because of situations like this. So I got to thank my staff as well.
So that being said, I mean, I know we don't make decisions tonight, but I am in agreement with, moving forward as we are, is, putting that in reserve, see how how we finish up this next fiscal year. And then, as we do budgets, let's be aggressive about these projects next year.
Yeah, I think we'll have a little better idea what we'll be able to do with the additional funding as well. We may be able to leverage that and really double down. So yeah, we'll be careful, but we do have a lot of stuff on the horizon that we're looking at that's going to be really exciting. So I think the timing could be very good.
Yeah, even with the if we get to 1.8 million dollars in reserves, I'd be even comfortable with getting that down to maybe $1 million, which opens up the door for us to have $800,000 worth of matching funds in case an infrastructure bill is passed. Then we can go ahead and start throwing matching money at some of those projects to get a lot of stuff done.
Yeah, that's another good reason to kind of hang tight for, these next few months to see what we get and be ready for whatever comes out first.
Is there any other questions? Again, this will be on YouTube. That was one of the questions. Thank you, Tony, for answering that.
Any questions from the public who may not have joined us in the beginning? All right, seeing none. Any additional comments from council or council report outs? All right, I'll check on Mandy's husband to see how David's doing. Dorothy, I saw Dorothy on, but maybe not now.
Yeah,
She was on. She might have gotten off. Just
No problem. I was just going to see if she had anything to report out. And T-Tong, anything to report out there?
Yes, actually I do, if you can bear with me for a couple of seconds.
Sure, absolutely.
I would like to thank Councilman Martini for my field trip. I really enjoyed it, and he
That's
actually
great.
survived my driving, which is
Yes,
the
I'm
best
fine.
part of that.
Fine, thank you.
Just wanted to let everyone know that the decking at Fernwood Dock was finished today. They will be coming back tomorrow morning to put a couple of finishing pieces on it, but it is ready and open for everyone to use now. The Public Works repaired a fence at Main Street between Park and Lake Butler Boulevard, so they were working hard on that and got that repaired. They've resealed the slab at the statue at Central Park, and they're picking up a sign for not playing on the statue, which they'll install this week. We fixed the pavers at the backside of the pavilion at Windermere Rec. We went out and took some traffic calming photographs today for traffic calming requests that have come into the town. We're getting quotes for the bank run sand material, and I can report that Public Works will be playing in the sand tomorrow because one of them is bringing a couple of samples of some products for us to play in. We will not let Mr. Fitzgibbons in it though, because we may not get him out. And then we're going to be meeting with Steadfast Environmental tomorrow morning as well to take a look at a ditch and a swale and ditch repair maintenance plan program potentially. We've cleaned off the Central Park Pavilion roof. We're getting a pallet of mulch tomorrow for the Parks and Tree Board joint project in Central Park. And then we re-asphalted 6th Avenue and Main roundabout. And we did monitor the weekend storms this weekend, and we were ready to mobilize if necessary. So that's my report. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Good job on the social media piece and letting everybody know what your team's doing. I think that goes a long way to answering some of the questions that folks have sometimes, hey, why this, why not that, so that's a great addition.
Yeah,
Absolutely, our
Anything
pleasure.
additional?
Mayor, if you don't mind, I also enjoyed our drive around for a couple hours, introduced Tanya to some of the residents, and they immediately said, oh, so when are you going to fix this thing over here? So she got a little taste of that. They were very, very nice, and it was a great drive around. I highly recommended. I think all the council people should do it to give their perspective and input on the projects that we've been dealing with over the years. And one of the things that Tanya talked about was doing a prototype section of roadway with the new surface materials that she's looking at before we go and pave, but lay down the whole thing. We're going to do a sample area. Pave is a 4-letter word here. So so looking forward to that. Thank you, Tanya. Great job.
Mayor, I do have a couple of things, if you'll just indulge me for a minute.
Absolutely, sir.
For those of you that have kids and that are involved in the WAYS committee, there is scholarship programs available to them through the Florida League of Cities, and we'll make sure we get Rayland and the WAYS committee that information. The iNaturalist Nature Challenge starts April 30th through May 6th. So we'll be doing a media blast about that. That is where you start taking pictures of the vegetation and animals within your surrounding area, and they're able to identify those. It's funny how I didn't know what some of these things were, and so I take a picture of it, then people help you out by identifying it. So it's really not a cumbersome process at all. We do have the graduation banner. So if you know some graduates that may not be involved in town, or people that just have their snipe signs in their front yard, just make sure they're aware that we do want those pictures, and we want to go ahead and make that a annual thing to where we do, congrats to our graduates. The app is up and working, so the alerts are working. First and foremost, again, it's tomorrow night at 6 p.m. We'll have Kinley Horn Associates on, as well as John Fitzgibbon and myself answering those questions as to the ultimate fix of that project, because we want to get started on that right away. over the weekend, I know that Councilman Martini and I were notified of some issues relative to tree prunings and tree removals. So I'll be working with not only Councilmember Martini, but also with the tree board on coming up with a protocol for the weekends as far as notifications and, making sure that, the arborists, not arborists, but the tree maintenance people know that if they do work on weekends, which they typically do, that we will have somebody out there making sure that we're monitoring, that they're doing everything right, because it always happens on the weekends to where Bill and I start getting text messages, emails, stuff like that on, some cuttings and stuff like that. So we want to make sure that we have a process in place to where we can send somebody out there right away, either stop them to make sure that the trees survive, or they don't hide the evidence of what they cut down. So we know how to find them if appropriate.
Yeah, we've had some pretty extensive damage in the last couple of months. You mentioned one of the house on Magnolia, and then we've also got an issue on 2nd Avenue. And my contact at Orange County EPD told me on the weekends or anytime that you see damage or suspected environmental catastrophe being done, to call 311 number, and they will assign an investigator immediately, regardless of what time or where it is, rather than having to wait till Monday and try and get in touch with somebody from EPD. So if you could share that info, just call 311 and Orange County will jump right on it, apparently. So
yeah, there's actually an app, 311 app too. So you can download the app and file a report through that app as well.
maybe that's something we could put out as an announcement on our app, Robert.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll be working with Diane on that one.
Thank you.
And then we're working on, and you will be considering a draft speed bump request form. I know that Tony's been working on that. It's gonna be similar to whenever somebody tries to request a stop sign. We wanna make sure that, there's a formal process that you have to go through and review, just so we're not plopping in stop signs or just plopping down speed bumps, because the minute you put a speed bump down, 4 people may be happy, but 20 people may be upset. And then we'll have those 20 people over at the next town council meeting. So we're putting a process in place to make sure that whatever we do relative to any traffic calming devices is justified, not only by Public Works, but also some engineering standards as well. And Tanya also has drafted the dirt road maintenance plan. I haven't had a chance to review that, but again, that's something that we've been looking for quite some time. And I'm just amazed at the ability that she has in order to already have a draft created. So we'll work with John and Tanya and, figure out, okay, well, how do we implement this? And once we're ready to share it with you, we will make sure that we share it with you. And just for your knowledge, Chief is out of town from Sunday until Friday of next week. So DC will be in charge. I think if she's back in, if not, we'll notify you of who's going to be the chain of command in case there's any situations that are PD related. And he'll probably send an email out anyway tomorrow. And that's all I have.
Thank you, sir.
May I take one temperature before we check out of here? You mentioned events. We've had a couple requests for the Craft Beer Fest from breweries if we're going to do it. I know I need to meet with you, Robert, about it, but I'd like to get the temperature of council, sooner than later. If we have the stomach for it. I mean, it'll be in October, so I think as with the food trucks, we're way down the line, but we do need to start planning now if we are going to take on the event again.
One word, Chris: Pancake-toberfest. Combine them all.
October Beer Fest.
That sounds amazing, actually. Sprinkle some bacon in there and it's heaven.
Apparently there's a 5K also that's going to be run in October. So we have to keep that in mind as well.
Yeah. So,
Well, okay. So, I mean, I do think we really need to make sure that we get our dates straight for all of these, because, we've got finite resources from every direction, but I know there's a lot of pent up enthusiasm. And of course we want to come back strong. So, let's plan it out, be methodical about it, get everything on there, and let's plan to go. I think, God willing, I think that's the way we're all headed. And hopefully we'll get enough people vaccinated. We can move it on.
Okay.
Fair?
Yeah, that's all I needed. If the temperature's warm or hot to, start moving forward, if we so do choose, then, I'll start having meetings with admin and see if we can launch it again.
I am,
So quick,
I'm optimistic.
quick question. What is the status of the food truck nights?
It's still TBD, but we were anticipating maybe coming back in August, September. Typically, June, July are not really well attended because of the heat. And we didn't want to be the guinea pig for our food truck events because we typically have a attendance between 1,500 and 2,000 people. So we were hoping that possibly August or September is when we would go ahead and begin the food truck event again.
Okay, thanks.
That's all I have.
So, all right, lots of good stuff, lots of optimistic stuff. So we like that. I really hope we're getting ready to turn the corner here. I feel like we are. So let's continue to plan that way and hope it all works out. And so if there's nothing else, I don't have anything for you guys this evening. So we'll go ahead and close our meeting at 7:42 p.m. And thanks everybody for the good questions, and thank you, Robert, for the thorough report, and I thank staff as well. You guys have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.